late last night says he will sign an executive order. He did not offer specifics such as the time frame or the scope of who would be affected. The South Korean government says there are no signs of unusual activity detected in North Korea after reports describing leader Kim Jong-un was in grave danger after heart surgery. Speculation often surfaces about North Korea's leadership based on attendance at most important state events. Kim missed the celebration of his late grandfather on April 15th, the country's most important holiday. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
Okay, Michael, thank you. We are live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, where it's just before 6:49 on Wall Street. Time to check what's going on in D.C. now. Some of the top stories there include the Senate voting as soon as today on another $500 billion in coronavirus stimulus. The Treasury Department handing out almost $3 billion to airlines in their first round of payroll assistance. And President Trump meeting later today with Andrew Cuomo for the first time since the coronavirus response put New York's governor in a national spotlight. Also making news, as Michael mentioned, the president saying he will sign an executive order to suspend immigration to contain the coronavirus. Let's bring in now Bloomberg U.S. politics editor Kathleen Hunter. So, Kate, we got this announcement, as we often do, in a late-night tweet from the president. Do we know what led up to this, what the president's working at here with this immigration focus now?
Well, I think that, broadly speaking, what's led up to it, Nathan, is a real push, on the part of the federal government and the Trump administration and the White House in particular to try to get the U.S. economy up and running, get businesses and, transportation back, unshuttered. And I think that this focus on immigration is a part of that, in the sense that the Trump administration has always characterized, the president himself has always characterized this as, a foreign threat, a foreign virus, and throughout, going back to the early days of the epidemic. And so I think that, by trying to shut down immigration now to the U.S., that's a way to kind of provide some political cover potentially as things do start to reopen. Yeah,
you do sort of have to wonder how much politics is at play in an announcement like this, particularly when Canada and Mexico, the borders there, have already tightened up significantly in the midst of the pandemic. And the overwhelming consensus in the scientific community that at this point, the virus is spreading. It doesn't seem to make much sense to talk about closing the borders further when we already have a pandemic in this country.
Well, yeah, I mean, the U.S. at this stage is really, I think, widely viewed as kind of the epicenter now of the pandemic. And so the idea that the threat would be outside the U.S. borders, I don't think is necessarily substantiated by science or the facts on the ground. If in fact there are some facts that back that up, we certainly haven't really seen them yet from the White House. And so I think it'll be interesting to see what the scope of this is and, what specifically the president's talking about. As you noted, he did make this announcement in a tweet last night, which has become common for him. It doesn't necessarily allow for a lot of the policy specifics to be filled in. And so certainly people are going to have questions today. It'll be interesting to see what exactly is entailed in this. But I do think there is certainly a political component involved.
It'll be interesting as well to watch what comes out of this meeting coming up this afternoon with the president and New York Governor Andrew Cuomo at a time when Vice President Pence is saying that there's enough testing capacity in the country for many states to think about reopening. And we're seeing some states, particularly in the South, already are making moves to reopen.
Yeah, we saw the Georgia governor taking some steps towards reopening, for example, there. I think that certainly in a state like New York that's been harder hit, it's probably going to be a much slower reopening process. But I think it'll be interesting to see what kind of both what comes out of the meeting with Trump and Cuomo today in terms of any kind of, policy dictate or any movement on that front in terms of the PPE or in terms of reopening. And then also just, these have been two important figures in the, response in the minds of the public to this whole episode. And I think that, they haven't always been completely uncritical of each other. So I think having the two of them meet in person, what the sort of tone and tenor of that meeting is, I think will be interesting to watch as well.
And possibly while this meeting is happening, we could get a vote in the Senate as soon as today on more aid for the small business package. And now, as Democrats have been pushing for state and local government assistance and money for hospitals as well.
That's right. So really the tension here overall between Republicans and Democrats has been the Republicans' primary focus has been on the small business programs, whereas Democrats have wanted this additional funding for other priorities, including hospitals, as you mentioned. And so Democrats did a few days ago secure some additional funding as part of the deal. And so that seems to have kind of at least begun to clear the way for votes potentially this week in both chambers on the next round of stimulus, which I think, both Republicans and Democrats want to be able to say, look, we're taking action here. We're not sitting on our hands. The small business program in particular was tapped out after less than 2 weeks. So, replenishing that is certainly something that both sides are going to be looking to do as quickly as possible.
In our last 30 seconds here, let's talk about the funding that Joe Biden has secured in the 2020 presidential race. He just reported his biggest fundraising haul yet.
He did, and I think that, he certainly is helped by, the trio of endorsements that he got last week from Barack Obama, Bernie Sanders, and Elizabeth Warren. I think that, it's not surprising to anyone that there was a big uptick, but that certainly is good news for him. The question, though, is whether he's still able to recover or regain some of the ground that he, doesn't have against Trump. Trump certainly is still outmatching him fundraising-wise.
Bloomberg U.S. Politics Editor Kathleen Hunter, thank you as always. Karen?
Nathan, thank you. It is 6:54 on Wall Street. It's time for the Bloomberg Small Business Report with John Tucker. Good morning again, John.
And good morning, Karen. Small business has been hit hard by the COVID-19 outbreak. So has the travel industry. Just imagine how Alex Cuten's company is doing. He owns and operates a small travel agency called Travel Leaders Indy. And Alex, I imagine the impact on your business has been pretty profound. Tell us exactly what you're going through.
Business, prior to COVID-19 was robust. I mean, real robust. What happened is it stopped. People said, not going, can't go. So what they did is they rebooked. So there we are. We're in the midst of, not only just canceling one trip, we're also, putting the effort in to get them booked for a later date. Our revenue is off by about 85%.
So what are you going to do without that revenue? This is a business that you started up in retirement, so you got a little better cushion?
Well, I did before the stock market went down.
You're taking it on all fronts, aren't you?
Yes, I am. I really am. And, as a small business owner, we're the last to get paid club. We pay our rent, we pay our employees, we pay, everything that we owe. And then if there's anything left at the end of the year, we get paid. And this year, I don't look to be making any money.
Now, have you applied for aid?
Yes, during the time that the CARES Act, $10,000, that we were led to believe that we would receive, we applied for that immediately. Did I get it? No. And then the PPP, whenever that program was announced and it came out, I applied immediately for that. And did I get it? No.
Well, have you gotten any update?
I got an email last night that the bank wanted me to reapply. And so this morning I came in to reapply. But I don't know if I'll get it or not.
It must keep you up at night wondering whether or not people will actually pick up travel again.
That's true, too. Of course, whenever somebody gets married, they're going to take a honeymoon most of the time. As long as that the countries that they want to go to are open. That's another question, too. What's happening in Europe? What's happening in Italy? Italy is our number one destination that we sell and send people to.
All right, up against the clock there, Alex Cuten. He and his wife own the Travel Leaders Indy Travel Agency in Indianapolis, Indiana. Alex, thanks for joining us, and keep us posted on that second application. We're going to continue bringing you stories of small businesses in the face of this pandemic every day at this time, right here on Bloomberg Daybreak. I'm John Tucker. That's the Bloomberg Small Business Report. Karen, back to you.
All right, John Tucker, thank you. We continue to watch shares of Coca-Cola up 1% this morning after first quarter results were better than feared. And we continue to watch the oil markets as well. Of course, NYMEX crude oil for May delivery is still trading in negative territory at minus $7.13 a barrel. And the June contract is at $16.56 this morning. Bloomberg Surveillance is straight ahead with Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrell, and Lisa Abramowitz. For Nathan Hager, I'm Karen Moscow, and this is Bloomberg.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Sherry Ann.
Joining us now is Wealth Enhancement Advisory Services Executive VP and CIO, Jim Kan. Jim, great to have you with us. What was interesting in today's session was this divergence that we saw in the markets. We had the price of oil collapse, but at the same time, really not a lot of movement when it comes to the U.S. stock markets or the Treasury markets. Why are we seeing such divergence in the markets, and will this continue?
It's pretty dramatic anytime you see the people paying to actually offload their oil, right? So when you see a negative price for oil, it means that in order to deliver that oil, you actually had to pay someone to take it. The headlines were obviously very sort of interesting around that phenomenon, but it didn't really affect the overall curve. So if you look at June, July, if you look at deliveries further out, the curve didn't shift quite as much. So what that tells you is it's mainly a technical situation affecting sort of delivery into May. And so some of the issues are they're running out of storage at Cushing. So oil in the United States, the WTI crude is based off the delivery in Cushing, Oklahoma. They're physically running out of places to put the oil. So I told a friend today if they had a tanker and a swimming pool, they could go down there and get paid, $25 to take the oil, put it in their swimming pool, and sell it in June and make almost a $45 spread.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listing. Business is like a puzzle. Can you make a call given the data?
Which segments of Alphabet's business are most likely to come under scrutiny?
Get all the pieces.
They're getting mixed signals from governments.
He's failed to gain traction.
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Surveillance Economics.
In this cycle, we've dealt with a lot of shocks.
It's important to understand what the Fed can and cannot do.
Finance.
There's no asymmetry left in markets. It truly is a zero-sum game.
We will get slower growth. Let's not get confused about that.
Investment.
Very few investors want to own any energy to begin with.
There's a great deal of uncertainty. People are trying to hide in safe places.
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrell, and Lisa Abramowitz on Bloomberg Radio.
From New York City for our audience worldwide, good morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance. Coming up on the program, crude oil plunging as storage quickly fills worldwide. Congressional leaders on the brink of a $500 billion deal. And looking ahead to earnings, Netflix reporting after the close. From the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio, hello Tuesday. Here is your Tuesday morning price action. Equities at session lows down 34 points on the S&P 500. We are negative 1.21%. Another morning of risk aversion we face this Tuesday. Treasuries with a bid. Yields lower by 3 basis points on a 10-year to 0.57%. In foreign exchange, I'll just bring you a quick snapshot of G10. The yen is where some of the underperformance is. The dollar, looking at the strength of the dollar against things like the Norwegian kroner, absolutely unbelievable to see the commodity currencies get really smacked around. So the yen strength is a story for you. Dollar yen coming in by around about 0.2%, but commodity currencies absolutely battered. If you want to look at the commodity story, it's in crude oil. Lots of talk about the May contract turning negative. The volume goes through the June contract, but June is getting battered as well. $16.70 on the June contract and down $3 or $4 on the session so far. So let's start the program by talking about oil, something that's been playing out in some physical markets in the United States for quite a while now. Very little demand for crude in a mandated shutdown of economic activity, and very few places left to store it, even if you do want it. Those issues today spreading deeper along the crude curve here in the United States and out into the Brent contract as well. These dynamics, I think, could be with us for a whole lot longer. That's what we're pricing today, and spread beyond the United States, so beyond WTI and into Brent. So today we need to get our hands around several issues. Is this just something that's going to be isolated to the oil market, or will it bleed more broadly into global markets? Tom King will be with us very shortly. I'm told he was up all night watching Tiger King ahead of Netflix earnings a little bit later, so he's well informed to talk about that company when we get those results. Lisa Abravitz, I understand, is with us now. Lisa,
yes.
Fantastic to catch up with you. Let's begin with the epicenter of the global market story today, and it is in crude oil.
Yeah, yesterday a lot of people were dismissing the aberration of negative prices as being this forced selling in a less liquid contract. Today, though, you're seeing that price action continue and you're seeing storage capacity fill up around the world. My question is, John, how idiosyncratic is this to the United States? How much is this a case of shale producers pumping and not being able to put that anywhere? How much is this global, and how much is this a reflection of a disinflationary environment that the central banks cannot fight anymore, given how much ammunition they've already deployed?
Well, they could buy some barrels of crude, couldn't they? They could build out some storage capacity here in the United States.
I think President Trump's trying to do that, right?
Maybe Jay Powell would support that mission.
Maybe that'll be a new type of QE that is unprecedented. We have not heard of any discussions to that effect. However, there is a question of what this says about the economy. Has the price of oil gotten divorced as a sort of, gauge of global growth, or is this a really bearish indicator on what's to come?
No, this is the cleanest way of expressing what's happening in the global economy right now, in the here and now. Never mind the hope for the future. Yeah, this is the cleanest way of expressing it. There's no demand, and because there's been no demand, because demand has totally crashed, storage is quickly filled up, and as you breach storage capacity, crude rolls over aggressively. This is the cleanest gauge of where we are in this economy.
The question is, where do we go, right? I mean, does this basically get reversed? And here's sort of the question, and I was hashing this out with a number of people yesterday, which is, why did we not see negative prices on the June contract? Why did we not see even lower prices? What is to say that the dynamic's going to be so different come the roll then than it is now? And I think that that's a key question. A lot of people pushing back and saying, no, this is less liquid. Yet why do we think that there's going to be more storage next time around?
Well, June right now, $16.60 coming in aggressively. Tom, I was told last night you were up all night watching Tiger King just so you could prepare for Netflix earnings after the close. Are you enjoying that?
Yeah, I'm loving it. It's really good, and I figure if the Fed does another program, it'll be Jay Exotic leading the way as well. We look for Netflix tonight, folks. We'll look coverage on that. Paul Sweeney with some really important perspective on that in the 9 o'clock hour, and then with Lisa later on in the morning. To me, the resounding reality, John, is Brent crude moved. I know you mentioned it there, but to be clear, this was a West Texas, Cushing, Oklahoma event yesterday. Brent was solid at $26 a barrel. And to see it come under the 23 level previously and now 21-ish is really, really key for me, that it's become a global reprice of oil.
Totally agree. That's been the story this morning. It's spread deeper through the WTI curve, and Brent has started to catch up with this move as well. Let's start the conversation of the morning, shall we? Greg Battle of BNP Paribas joins us now, the US head of equity and derivative strategy. Greg, fantastic to catch up with you, sir. The market, should it view what is happening in the commodity market as a story, a technical story isolated to crude, or a broader market story we need to pay attention to?
It absolutely has to be both. So for sure there's some idiosyncratic stuff to do with storage and the fact this is the front month and it's expiring. But the reality is, and you just touched on this, that we wouldn't be in this situation if demand wasn't zero. We've had this shutdown across the country that's going to see GDP plunge, unemployment skyrocket. And that's the fundamental reason why we're in this situation in the oil market. And that reads across to every other risky asset.
So there's a question, can equities in the United States rally if oil prices continue to go down? And I'm thinking about the thousands of jobs that are being lost, 9% of the workforce in the U.S. shale patch so far, just in March alone. What do you read in terms of a signal for U.S. stocks?
I don't think having the kind of capitulation that we've seen in oil can be viewed as anything other than unhealthy for kind of capital markets generally. what we've seen in U.S. equity markets, we had this extremely volatile crash that took the market down 35%, and we've now had a massive rally that I view as a bear market rally. I think history tells us, and we've had a long look across the history of crashes, that when you have a steep economic downturn, that is very rare for bear markets to last a month or two. They're typically much longer in duration, much more protracted.
Greg, part of this is wealth destruction. Just to look at the ETF fiasco, and Martin Ratz's John Farrell was just phenomenal with Morgan Stanley this morning, walking through the tangible ETF dynamics of oil. But Greg, what's so important here to me is people are going to lose money. How does the wealth destruction that we're seeing now fold into equity performance 6 months or 6 years down the road?
Yeah, there's absolutely an impact. So we're going to be hit by two things in equities. One is a wealth effect because of what's happening in capital markets generally. And the other is just quite simply what's happened in unemployment in the US and the strength of the economy. Both of these things are going to have a negative feedback loop that come back into equities. So yeah, I think we've got a really challenging period ahead of us.
You know, I want to go back to something that John was talking about earlier, how the price of oil is a very accurate gauge of where we are in an economy that's basically been shuttered, period, full stop. The question now is duration, right? And I think that that's sort of what we're seeing in the future contracts for oil. There is hope that the near future is going to be very different, or at least there will be more demand and a bit of more balance in the market. Greg, do you think that optimism is misplaced?
Well, I think you have to be careful having a lot of optimism that we're going to see a V-shaped recovery and everything reopen and go back to normal quickly. Now, clearly, we're very much hoping that we do start the path to normalcy and that this virus starts to dissipate and people can start to reopen businesses. Clearly, that's going to increase this incremental demand for things like crude from zero to something somewhat higher. But that doesn't mean that the state of the economy and the state of markets going back to where they were several months ago in the next couple of months. Typically, the path to recovery is much slower and longer than the crash on the way down.
Well, Lisa, I think if you wanted a more constructive way of looking at what's happening on the screen today and yesterday, you could say this is the necessary pain we need to go through in the short term to rebalance the oil market in the medium to long term. Now, medium long term, pick a day, any day. I was talking to Amrita Sen of Energy Aspects yesterday about this. You're going out deep into 2021, into 2022. And if you think about the environment that this is going to have, this is generating this move at the moment. CapEx, not going to be much of that. You're going to really strip out supply capacity, build more storage because of what is happening as well. The dynamic that plays out today sets up a different crude world 2 years down the road.
I agree, John, but to me the fascinating thing is there was a story that Saudi Arabia is considering perhaps bringing forward the cuts that will go into effect in May to a little bit earlier, given the fact that we're seeing negative price contracts.
10 days matters in this world, right?
Absolutely, 10 days matters, but it shows the tone deafness, right? I mean, honestly, they're considering possibly doing this at a time when oil prices are falling to the floor. It just raises a question about, yes, there may be capacity and there might be production that's cut, but is this really a reality check? I mean, why wouldn't they cut it now?
No, I think they understand that there's very little they can do in this environment. We're talking about crude demand collapsing by 20, 30 million barrels a day through Q2. What can you do on the supply side? They can cut by 10 million. 10 million, that cut was really, really big in the grand scheme of things. But when you think about what's been happening with demand, it's just not big enough, nowhere near enough.
Yeah, if you look at international flights, for example, down 90%. In the past month.
Yeah, and potentially spilling over into May and June as well. Greg, great to catch up with you, sir. Always great to hear from you. Greg Battle there of BNP Paribas. So get some news, some headlines worldwide. We can do that with Michael Barr this morning. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, John. Lisa, Tom. President Donald Trump said he will sign an executive order temporarily suspending immigration into the United States as the country tries to contain the spread of the coronavirus. President Trump made the announcement by tweet late last night and did not offer specifics such as the time frame or the scope of who would be affected. Many states are struggling to meet the demand for test kits. Maryland's Republican Governor Larry Hogan cut a deal with a lab in South Korea for 500,000 tests. Hogan also pointed out in a call with Vice President Pence and Dr. Deborah Birx that he didn't have access to federal labs that were on a state-by-state list offered by the White House.
you might want to go back and whoever putting this list together, just pull out the ones that we don't actually have access to. But we appreciate you identifying the labs, and we're in contact with every one of them, so we appreciate it very much.
The president attacked Hogan, saying Hogan needed to get a little knowledge. President Trump insisted again that states have enough COVID-19 tests to begin the process of reopening the country. The president also touted a decrease in cases in some parts of the U.S.
Many of the areas hardest hit by the virus appear to have turned the corner. For example, recent deaths are down very, very substantially. You can compare that with their peak not so long ago.
The Trump administration and congressional leaders insist a final deal is in reach on an aid package for small businesses that could exceed $450 billion. President Trump says he hopes to see a Senate vote today. Most of the funding would go to replenish a payroll loan program that's out of money. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, John.
Michael Barr, sir, thank you very much. We count you down to the opening bell, around about 2 hours away in New York City, with equity futures negative 1.5% on the S&P 500, near session lows, and down around about 42 points on a session so far. Tom, I know you've discussed it through the morning. The move in the June contract now on WTI, and the move in Brent too. It goes deeper, it spreads wider.
Yeah, they're both important, but the Brent, to me, it's become a global observation versus yesterday, where it was so discreetly American. Brent crude 21.18, down 17.2%.
Unbelievable. Much more still to come. Alongside Tom Keene, I'm Jonathan Ferro, together with Bloomberg's Lisa Abramowitz.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong. Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Influential conversation.
Oh, just there, Dave. Smashing. Great. Really? Night, Steve.
Yeah, see ya.
Built to take the big knocks. Samsung rugged devices. Easy to use, hard to break. explore the Samsung Rugged range.
Did you know that players of People's Postcode Lottery have raised over £500 million for charities and good causes? They've also won £47 million in prizes so far this year, and it could be your postcode next. Visit postcodelottery.co.uk/radio before midnight on the 23rd of April to play in the May draws. PPL managed lotteries on behalf of good causes. 16 plus, conditions apply, play responsibly.
Dating can be tricky, especially when you can't meet face to face. So it's time to get creative with the easy way to replace physical dates, Video Call from Bumble, the dating app where women make the first move. Here's Anna Williamson and Tom Reed-Wilson with some tips on connecting online.
It's a bit harder to flirt with limited body language, but nothing beats a smile and some eye contact to show them you're interested.
And have an activity plan for your date. This will help break the ice.
Download Bumble today.
It's 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. U.S. stock index futures are falling along with European shares as uncertainty about the health of North Korea's dictator introduced more unease into markets roiled by the ongoing oil collapse and the coronavirus pandemic. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures down about 37 points. Dow futures down 416. NASDAQ futures down 67. The DAX in Germany is down 2.7%. 10-year Treasury up 9/30 seconds. Yield 0.57%. Yield on the 2-year 0.18%. West Texas Intermediate remaining in focus after May contracts expiring today plunged at the start of the week, taking crude below zero for the first time in history. Right now, the May contract is at negative $5.78 a barrel. Checking the June contract, it's at $16.40, and Brent is at $21.36 a barrel. COMEX gold is down 2.5% on $43 at $16.6710 an ounce. The euro 1.0830 against the dollar. The yen is at 107.42. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. John.
Karen, thank you very much. Just after 10 p.m. last night, overnight, a tweet from the President of the United States, and very little clarity on what it actually means. This is what the President had to say. In light of the attack from the invisible enemy, as well as the need to protect the jobs of our great American citizens, I will be signing an executive order to temporarily suspend immigration into the United States. Tom, very, very little visibility on what that tweet actually means.
And in the reporting this morning of this late-night tweet, very clearly this was unilateral on the part of the president. Many of the cabinet authorities and officials did not know about this, or it was certainly out of the blue. Our Kevin Cirilli provides perspective, our chief Washington correspondent. Kevin, there has to be a morning after for a late-night presidential tweet. What would you expect today of an implied executive order? Can he do that, and will he do that?
I mean, I think this is a very political tweet, right? I mean, this is an administration that has taken a hardline approach for immigration, even since the first campaign and whatnot. It's simple. I mean, I'll be really crystal clear here. Republicans and the president are banking during the re-election campaign that their slogan essentially will be reopen the economy, close the border. Reopen the economy, close the border. And that's what you're seeing happen right now and in terms of the messaging coming from the White House.
Kevin, I'm just struggling to get my head around this. For many people who are on a visa at the moment or thinking about getting a job in the United States of America, what does this all mean for companies that are trying to plan for the future over the next 12 months that might need some talent from abroad, from Europe, from Asia, from elsewhere? What do they do?
Well, they're not going anywhere for quite some time. I think in the sense, I had a source tell me yesterday during the day about all of the people who are still trying to get into the United States because they're in countries where the infrastructure doesn't even exist to tackle something like a global pandemic. And so the message from the White House last night in the late night tweet is, he doesn't want to see an influx in illegal immigration during this time.
Kevin, International flights have been reduced by 90%. Basically, travel is moribund at this point. What I'm trying to figure out, how much is this a distraction technique away from focus on the distribution of funding from small businesses and the pandemic and the response to it versus true policy that we need to look at and scrutinize in terms of its longer term effects on businesses as well as social policy?
That's a great point. I think based upon the conversations that I have here in Washington, it's a largely political moment, and I think it's a way for the administration to have something else to talk about in terms of politics during this time in the mainstream fodder. So that's one. And then secondly, on the Paycheck Protection Program, that I'm told could be voted upon as early as today, if not the latest on Thursday.
Okay, so that is actually moving ahead, and there will be more funding, most likely approved in the very near term in order to get to small businesses. On the immigration question, previous efforts of President Trump to unilaterally ban or severely limit immigration have been challenged and successfully overturned in the court system. Is this basically the feeling right now that a similar type of overruling will occur in this case?
So, I'll have to get back to you in terms of the specifics, just because we don't have an executive order, Lisa, in terms of what
Fair.
he's actually
You've got a
put
tweet.
out. Yeah.
Understood. Okay, carry on.
But I will say but I will say that he's had Republicans and Democrats alike have had a mixed bag in the courts, as we all know, about certain rulings that have gone for each side. But I think I think from a larger takeaway as we plan out this week of getting the small businesses approved, and then the immigration question, it allows again Republicans to talk about something else and to engage with Democrats on a different topic. And lastly, the one thing I have on my radar, I went to bed last night thinking this was going to be the main story, was Cuomo at the White House. And then, of course, you get the news on immigration and North Korea. But Cuomo at the White House today will be remarkable.
What will you expect to see of that? I mean, am I right that some people talk of him as a presumed vice presidential candidate with Vice President Biden?
Well, Biden said he's going to pick a female for that role, but I think the Cuomo narrative that they've been pushing is that the Cuomos are going to be involved in presidential Democratic politics beyond the 2020 election.
Oh.
Kevin, always great to get your
Thanks,
thoughts.
guys.
Kevin Cerrita joining us out of Washington. Guys, look, the easy response to the tweet overnight is something Lisa touched on. No one's getting on a flight anytime soon. Shutting down immigration temporarily, okay, in line with the fact that nobody is getting on a flight anytime soon. Is that going to make a difference? But I don't think we should be naive about what the future might have in store for us here. When we reopen these economies, and this is not just about the United States, it's worldwide, there is going to be a real reassessment about trade, supply chains, and immigration, and in a massive, massive way. And I think that's something we need to pay a lot more attention to.
Yeah, there's a plane flying across Central Park right now, John. It's like one of those beach planes over in the Jersey Shore, and it's got a big pennant behind it saying, "Save John." There it is. I mean, John, it's tangible. I mean, for you, it's like a real thing.
Tom.
It's like Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Yeah.
Save Jonathan Ferris.
But John, it's like tangible. I mean, you're living this. I mean, you got a visa, and then what do?
I get sent back to London. Okay, I mean, it's not the end of the world. What I feel sorry for is a lot of people who work very, very hard all their life with a huge, huge dream, and that's to come to the United States and work. And I think that they should be thinking about ways to keep the door open for them.
Well, I will say, though, John, to your point about the supply chains and a deglobalization, I think that that's the issue. And that is something that is bipartisan. We're hearing that from a lot of different people saying we need to become more dependent on ourselves. And I think that that's what to look for going forward.
You see now Tom sort of set this up to send me back home.
Oh, no, I would never do that. No.
Seriously?
The first time I've heard Tom come close to agreeing with the president. keep him out. From New York this morning. Good morning. Equity.
Terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Vattel Shah is Senior Project Engineer at Mott MacDonald, a global engineering consultancy with more than 16,000 employees. He earned his PhD at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and as an adjunct professor, is helping NJIT students explore emerging technologies.
My focus is renewable markets, emerging technologies, the idea of floating cities. What are we doing to develop that? What will happen to the city on the water? Well, you're going to have waves hitting it. You're going to have solar. How are you going to develop plants? How are you going to develop vegetation and farming? That sort of thought process happens at NJIT. We actually plan out what will the city look like. How do we develop that? So in 10 years, we're actually ready to take on those challenges when we have our first development in the water. NJIT also has been doing a lot of work in self-healing materials, so taking the polymers and the new material that we have in our material sciences departments and putting them into things like concrete, things like steel, reinforcing our soil.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
This is
Oh, just there, Dave. Smashing. Great. Really? Night, Steve.
Yeah, see ya. Built to take the big knocks. Samsung rugged devices. Easy to use, hard to break. Explore the Samsung rugged range.
Dating can be tricky, especially when you can't meet face to face. So it's time to get creative with the easy way to replace physical dates, video call from Bumble, the dating app where women make the first move. Here's Anna Williamson and Tom Reed-Wilson with some tips on connecting online.
It's a bit harder to flirt with limited body language, but nothing beats a smile and some eye contact to show them you're interested.
And have an activity plan for your date. This will help break the ice.
Download Bumble today.
Okay, people, I've got the daily checklist. Who today has eaten dinner for breakfast? Tick. Started a chore you'll never finish? Tick. Done a conference call in your pajamas? Tick. Here's another for your list. BritBox. Streaming the BBC, ITV, Channel 5, and now Channel 4. All in one place and ad-free. So add BritBox to your list and get a 30-day free trial of the biggest box of British box sets. Search BritBox free trial. Tick. Biggest compared to other SVOD providers. Auto-renews at $5.99 a month unless cancelled. T's and C's apply.
Casting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 1061 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
From New York City, this is Bloomberg Surveillance for our audience worldwide. We're live on Bloomberg Radio, 2 hours away from the opening bell in New York. Equity futures on the S&P 500, negative 40 points and down around about 1.4, call it 1.5%. Outside of that, in the bond market, firmer treasuries yields lower by 3 basis points to 0.575%. The commodity currencies underperform in the FX market. The yen is where your outperformance is against the dollar, but at the epicenter of the price action, once again, a move in crude. Tom Keene, that sucking noise that you can hear is the front end of the crude curve and the June contract just zipping lower.
We sat yesterday afternoon, John in his abode, me in my abode, Javier Blas in his abode, and everybody else, and watched West Texas Intermediate collapse. That's Cushing, Oklahoma. We say good morning to all of you listening on Sirius XM from North Dakota on down to the Permian Basin. This morning, it's global. Brent crude comes in with a vengeance. To frame that right now, Brent crude 26.27 down to 21. The June West Texas Intermediate is $16 a barrel, and still a negative statistic on a one-day remaining West Texas Intermediate. Our interview of the day on oil, Martin Rotz of Morgan Stanley. Martin, I want to cut to the chase and do the derivative ballet right now, because I know John and Lisa have got some huge questions on oil and its future. There is a Greek letter called theta, which is the time decay of future. Given how odd things are now, do we see normal theta for June and July contracts, or do they collapse more rapidly because of the larger situation we're in?
Yeah, I'd be inclined to say I'd be inclined to say the latter. There's quite an interesting situation going on with the June and July futures at the moment. There has been huge inflows in oil ETFs over the last couple of weeks, and this is likely inflows from retail investors, other market participants that are trying to pick the bottom in oil, and then end up buying these oil ETFs. But what oil ETFs typically do, they buy relatively early month futures and then roll them close to expiry. Over the last few weeks, most of these ETFs have been rolling into the June and to a certain extent the July future. So they've had very, very significant support from these flows. Having said that, though, if you start to look at the actual supply-demand situation for oil, it's not so obvious that by the time those contracts expire, the storage situation around Cushing will be very different from what it is in May. And therefore, when ultimately the prices of these futures will need to connect to the physical reality, then they are likely to crack lower. And I think that is a dynamic that is broadly at play, in the sense that also this morning you're seeing the second month Brent future, which is the June future, and the July future also under renewed pressure again.
And Martin, that's what I want to discuss with you this morning. I think we're all interested in having that conversation. What is happening in the physical markets? And it's been taking place for a number of weeks now in the United States. As Tom pointed out at the start of this conversation, today it feels more global. The pain starts to spread to the Brent contract in a bigger way. Can you walk us through the individual dynamics of, say, the US crude market at the moment, just in terms of storage, and compare that to the nature of the logistical limits of, say, the international markets, which would shape the Brent contract?
Yeah, it's a good one. Look, frankly, this has become a very, very complicated and to a certain extent somewhat frustrating exercise. As in the past, typically when oil prices were lower, you would say, look, what is high cost production? And could the countries that supply those higher cost barrels, could their production be at risk sooner than others? But at the moment, we're in a situation where there are so many logistical bottlenecks popping up pretty much in all of the major producing countries, whether on the whole we see them as low cost or high cost. We're simply running into these logistical issues. For example, Brazil sits relatively favorable on the global cost curve from a pure production cost perspective. But Brazilian oil tends to be what we call a long-haul crude. It's typically shipped to refineries in China and elsewhere in Asia over long distances. But with tanker rates going up so much, because we're using tankers to store oil offshore, there's huge demand for tankers. These transportation costs go higher and higher, which means that also Petrobras has now said that they will cut 200,000 barrels a day of production because of this dynamic. You have crudes in Russia, for example, or Nigeria, also a good example, which we on the whole do not regard as high-cost crudes, but both those countries have very little domestic storage capacity, for example. So they will be impacted. So rather than us being able to do a global analysis and say, oh, these are the high-cost producers, these are the low-cost producers, these will be more impacted, these will be less impacted, we now need to start analyzing these hyper-local situations around storage depots, around pipelines, connection to the seaborne market. And that is just a very nitty-gritty analysis that we're all trying to figure out as we speak.
Sure. And I think that that is the story in oil right now. I was interested in the world's biggest independent oil storage company. The CFO said that they are quickly running out of space, and that from what he hears around the world, they're not the only ones. My question is, why is this dynamic going to change in June, July, or even August, when everybody says, yes, there may be a bit of a reopening, but the economy is not going to go back to normal for a long time? Martin, why will this dynamic change?
I think we might have lost Martin Ratz there, Morgan Stanley's global oil strategist.
I think he ran away.
Lisa's question just scared the hell out of him. Maybe we have to deal with this deep into summer.
Well, I mean, frankly, we should be talking about that, because a lot of people are pushing back and saying, no, this is near term. But what are you going to do, John? Are you going to put some in your apartment?
Put it in Tom's.
I think Tom offered up a bedroom.
We were having fun yesterday, folks, after we all got up from the surveillance nap, and we had an oil tanker, and Lisa wouldn't take it, so we decided whether John and I would take the oil truck as well. Martin Ratz, I believe, is back with us, reconnected with Morgan Stanley as well. Martin, what's so important here is looking out to June and July. Explain why oil isn't like a virus lockdown. How does oil restart? Is it an easy thing to restart demand?
No, it's not an easy thing to restart demand. And the tricky thing is this. The restart in oil demand will likely be uneven across the products. So you would likely see some more driving before we start flying again. Now the issue is that if you put a barrel of crude oil in a refinery, typically you're going to get various products in a certain relatively predetermined mix. An individual refinery, once it's bought a certain crude, can flex a little bit, produce a bit more gasoline, a bit less jet fuel, but on the whole, less so. So if simply we are not going to be flying anytime soon, that creates all sorts of problems for refineries if we do need some of the gasoline demand. So the uneven nature of the restart of the economy is a challenging one for the oil industry.
Yeah. Fascinating. Martin, thank you so much for joining Bloomberg Surveillance this morning. Here again, folks, with Brent coming in like West Texas Intermediate yesterday. Mr. Ratz is with Morgan Stanley. The Bloomberg NJIT STEM Report, always brought to you by New Jersey Institute of Technology, offering an MBA that provides STEM professionals with a technology-focused experience. Learn more at njit.edu/MBA. Here's Bob Boone.
Tom, Jonathan, Lisa, good morning. Here's what's making news in science, technology, engineering, and math. There have been wacky beliefs and conspiracy theories focused on wireless communications before, but this may be the wackiest yet. Conspiracy theories linking new 5G mobile networks and the coronavirus pandemic are fueling arson attacks on cell towers across Europe. The global spread of the virus at the same time countries were rolling out fifth-generation wireless technology has convinced some people to spread the false claims on Facebook and other social media sites. Some 50 fires targeting cell towers and other equipment have been reported in Britain this month, leading to 3 arrests. Similar attacks have been reported in the Netherlands, Ireland, Cyprus, and Belgium. Officials in Europe and the U.S. are watching the situation closely and pushing back, including the medical director of England's National Health Service, Stephen Powis.
I'm absolutely outraged, absolutely disgusted that people would be taking action against the very infrastructure that we need to respond to this health emergency. It is absolute and utter rubbish, and I can't condemn it in stronger terms than that.
One threat posted to an anti-vaccine group on Facebook sought to link a picture of a burned tower to both cancer and COVID-19, warning, stop trying to make it happen or every pole and mobile store will end up like this one. The European Commission insists there is no geographic or any other correlation between the deployment of 5G and the outbreak of the virus. That's the Bloomberg NJIT STEM report. Tom, Lisa, John?
Bob, thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Let's get you some headlines, some news worldwide. Here's Michael Barr.
Thank you, John. Lisa, Tom. President Donald Trump said he will sign an executive order temporarily suspending immigration into the United States as the country tries to contain the spread of the coronavirus. The president tweeted late last night that he made the decision in light of the attack from the invisible enemy as well as the need to protect the jobs of our great American citizens. A new Wall Street Journal NBC News poll finds that a majority of voters support changing election laws so that everyone can vote by mail during the pandemic. About 58% of voters in the survey said that they favor changing election laws permanently to allow voting by mail, while 39% oppose a permanent change. 1/4 of that group says mail-in voting should be allowed this November due to the virus. A new study out of Los Angeles County and the University of Southern California says the coronavirus may be much more widespread than has been generally thought. Bloomberg's Ed Baxter has the story.
An estimated 320,000 adults in LA County may have been infected, and of course that would mean that the proportional death rate would be lower. Estimated that approximately 4.1% of the county's adult population of 8 million has antibodies to the virus. When adjusted for margin of error, the infection rate ranged from 2.8 to 5.6%. Dr. George Rutherford, though, an epidemiologist at the University of California, San Francisco, said a lot of coronavirus research results are being released prematurely. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Radio.
The South Korean government says Kim Jong-un appears to be handling North Korea's affairs as usual after unconfirmed rumors he had undergone heart surgery. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, John.
Michael Barr, thank you, sir. Thank you very much. I just want to take the opportunity to give a huge shout out to our colleague, John Tucker, who has done some fantastic work covering the pain that some small businesses are going through at the moment. Every day, just before this show starts, he brings you a little segment with an interview, Tom, with a small business owner and the troubles that they're having getting access to capital, how they've had to adjust. And it really reveals just the difference of the small business experience versus the large cap right now.
You know, the uproar over Shake Shack yesterday and Ruth Chris's Steakhouse and all that.
And rightly.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing. Can we say that many small business people haven't gotten their checks yet? I think that's true, right?
I hope that we can change that, and I hope that when they top up the funds, whether it happens today or later this week, they can adjust the rules somewhat to make sure the money goes to where it needs to go, Tom.
Well, we will see. It's I guess legislation Wednesday. That's tomorrow.
Hopefully quickly. Here's your price action this Tuesday morning, 1 hour at around about 47 minutes away from the opening bell. We're down by 1.76%. We're negative 50 points on the S&P. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg Business of Sports Report. I'm Michael Barr. The U.S. economic slump has slammed college budgets across the country, and it's only going to get worse if the football season, the largest source of sports revenue at most big schools, is scrapped or delayed this fall. Take Clemson, for instance, the only school to participate in each of the past 5 college football playoffs. At best, Clemson sees a revenue drop of about $7.5 million, a manageable hit on a sports budget that grew to $132 million last year. From there, administrators turn to more dire possibilities, a partially disrupted college football season, or in the worst case, one that doesn't happen at all. The money comes from 4 main revenue sources: ticket sales, donations, media rights, and licensing and marketing. Iowa State Athletic Director Jamie Pollard notably compared a year without football to the Ice Age. And that is a Bloomberg Business of Sports report. I'm Michael Barr.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Global News 20.
Oh, just there, Dave. Smashing. Great. Really? Night, Steve.
Yeah, see ya. Built to take the big knocks. Samsung rugged devices. Easy to use, hard to break. Explore the Samsung rugged range.
Okay, people, I've got the daily checklist. Who today has eaten dinner for breakfast? Tick. Started a chore you'll never finish? Tick. Done a conference call in your pajamas? Tick. Here's another for your list. BritBox. Streaming the BBC, ITV, Channel 5, and now Channel 4. All in one place and ad-free. So add BritBox to your list and get a 30-day free trial of the biggest box of British box sets. Search BritBox free trial. Tick. Biggest compared to other SVOD providers. Auto-renews at $5.99 a month unless cancelled. T's and C's apply.
When we're stuck indoors all day, we might find our energy bills creeping up uninvited. The cheeky rascals. And none of us need that right now. But by simply switching your energy with Money Supermarket, you could save £280 on your bills. It's just one small step towards money calm. Money Supermarket.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games. With Game Replay on TuneIn, you can hear every matchup of the 2019-2020 season so far. And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search Classic Game Replays to start listening.
4 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow, and we continue to watch West Texas Intermediate. It remains in focus after May contracts expiring today, plunged at the start of the week, taking crude below zero for the first time in history. Checking those May contracts, they're still negative. They're at minus $3.32 a barrel. The June contract is at $16.12 a barrel, and Brent is at $20.90. U.S. stock index futures are falling today. S&P futures down about 50 points. Dow futures down 562, and NASDAQ futures down 85. The DAX in Germany is down 3%. 10-year Treasury up 12/30 seconds, yield 0.56%, and the yield on the 2-year 0.19%. COMEX gold is down 2.2%, down $37 at $16 at make that $1,674 an ounce. The euro 1.0834 against the dollar, the yen at 107.39. And Philip Morris International abandoned its 2020 earnings guidance as the coronavirus outbreak weighs on duty-free tobacco sales, while travelers faced a double whammy of natural disaster losses and virus-related charges during its first quarter. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom, John, and Lisa.
Karen, thank you very much. We should say it. It has been good to see the likes of governors in states like New York get along with the federal government and get things done. It has been good to see Secretary Mnuchin working with Democrats and getting things done. And today, the governor of New York, Tom, meeting with the President of the United States.
Yeah, in crisis, you really figure out who can do what. And I think everybody, Republicans and Democrats, would suggest the governor of New York has provided leadership. Part of that is he has an eclectic group around him, including our wonderful Lieutenant Governor from Buffalo, New York, joining us now. And what is so important about Kathy Hochul is she was originally way back a Democrat and a member of the Conservative Party as well. That is very cool and straddles the emotions of the time. Lieutenant Governor, what would you suggest your governor will say to the president today?
Well, as you mentioned, I think it's important for us to work with all of our partners, including the President of the United States. And what the governor is going to do is continue to make our case why places like New York State need the federal government's assistance to invoke the Defense Production Act and to help us with supply chains, because our way into recovery stems on us being able to have mass-scale, wide-scale testing so we know who've had the virus before so they can be the first to get back to work. But New York can't do this alone. We don't have the access to the chemicals that are necessary, the swabs, and the federal government, treating this as a national state of emergency, has the power to invoke to deploy this so states like New York can move faster, because no one is more anxious to reopen our economy than the governor and myself. So that's what this conversation is about, but also continuing to ask for more money in the next stimulus plan, because states are taking on the chin. States like New York need more money.
And the conservatives are going to say, no, we don't want to do that. Where would that money go to? If you get $1 gajillion from Washington, where will it go?
Well, first of all, our revenues have gone down to a trickle. The state of New York is projecting to lose at least $15 billion in revenues in this budget year, which paralyzes our ability to continue to fund local governments and schools and hospitals and the many programs that are just part of living in New York. And that's our challenge, how we meet that in addition to the exorbitant expenses that have accrued from combating this pandemic, the extra costs for PPE, protective equipment, of having to purchase ventilators at exorbitant prices because we are competing in a global market. And also just the healthcare workers, how we're reimbursing and supporting the hospitals to cover all these extraordinary costs. So we have more costs, we have less revenue. We are in a state of crisis in terms of our fiscal state, but our main focus right now is just saving people's lives and continuing to make the trend of new cases continue downward in hospitalization. So we're still in the middle of the heat of this, but very cognizant of the fact that the federal government, we hope, will understand why a place like New York, hardest hit place in the world, needs additional help from the feds to help us just get back to some semblance of normal with respect to funding essential programs in the state of New York.
And Kathy, I was just looking at the unemployment trust fund balance in New York, which has been depleted by almost entirely, 50%, given from February through mid-April to fight the coronavirus's effects, namely people filing for unemployment. How much longer do you have before that's gone?
I don't have a date when that's going to run out, but you're absolutely right that there's tremendous stress on a system that, think about how we normally would handle maybe 50,000, even phone calls a week. That went from 50,000 to 10 million over a phenomenally short period of time. We have allocated now 3,100 people on the call lines. We've redone our website. We've tried to make the whole process of applying easier. But the problem is that there's a finite amount of money in that fund. And so you're absolutely right. This is just another area where New York State could see a shortfall. But the last thing we ever want to say to New Yorkers who've been hit hard and lost their job and are just reeling in disbelief of what situation has been wrought on their families, that we can't say to them there's not money for you to cover unemployment. So we will have to figure that out as well. And that's just another challenge on why federal assistance in the next stimulus, along with small businesses, along with our farmers and a lot of other entities, don't forget the $500 billion that Governor Cuomo and Republican Larry Hogan, the chair of the National Governors Association, are begging for. Just help us with this and help us get through this time.
Kathy, just real quick here. My older son said to me yesterday, do you think that in 6 months' time everything's going to be back to normal? And I said no. And he said, what about a year? What do you think?
A year would be nice. We don't know. I mean, we are dealing with the absolute unknown here. This is unprecedented. So for us as elected officials to try to figure out like a timeline, we're in the throes of a crisis. We want to see the light at the end of the tunnel. We're starting to see a glimmer of it, but we also just recognize that this is going to take some time. And in addition, what is normal going to look like? I mean, are people going to feel comfortable going into large venues and on the subway system and into their workplace? So I think the broad-based testing is going to be what gives people some level of comfort, but certainly a vaccination that is widely administered is what's going to give people the sense, like, I can go out, I'm going to be safe, my children are going to be fine, and now we'll start creeping back up to the old normal, which may be now an improved normal. We have an opportunity here to reimagine all of our delivery systems of services, transportation, healthcare. This is an opportunity that we've created a task force with elected officials, including the mayor of New York City, the county executives of Westchester, Nassau, and Suffolk, and I've asked them to help us reimagine the new economy going forward in New York. So that's important. But Right. And I appreciate it. And you mentioned working together. I was a member of Congress, and so I saw gridlock firsthand. I know what dysfunction looks like, and I think what the governor is doing is creating an opportunity that wasn't there before. But I do want to correct one thing. I've been a lifelong member of the Democratic Party. The conservatives supported me as well as the Working Family Party way back when I was running for
a few years ago.
So,
okay.
I'm going to correct that record and say I'm a proud Democrat my entire life.
Very good. We got to leave it there. Lieutenant Governor, thank you so much. Kathy Hochul today with us. Please stay with us. Across this nation, this is Bloomberg Futures, more than negative. Dow Futures, negative 500. This is Bloomberg. Good morning.
Asset managers who sees change to look.
Find and fund my car, from a Mini to a Jaguar.
Feel good car buying from findandfundmycar.com is the place where you can find quality used cars from trusted dealers rated by you, and where you can fund your car with finance to fit your budget. It's feel good car buying all in one place.
Shouldn't be a carry on, choose findandfundmycar.com.
TuneIn makes it easy to be a part of the conversation. Just make sure push notifications are enabled to hear about breaking news and trending topics from around the sports world. You'll also get custom recommendations of podcasts and radio stations covering the sports and teams you care about. Get ready for the 2020 NFL Draft with TuneIn.
Do your homework on this year's top prospects, rising stars, and late-round sleepers with football podcasts like Move the Sticks.
Is my pick because I know he is an athletic freak, a guy that is capable of doing it all. He can blitz, he can run, he can cover.
And when the draft gets underway on April 23rd, follow every round and every pick for free.
In the 2018 NFL.
It's always football season on TuneIn.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, well, Jeter Downs didn't realize he was a top. Like my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course, Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for a favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
round the bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike, just to go over the first couple of picks. Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Wondering what to play next? Want to know what other TuneIn listeners are listening to right now? Head to the trending section under Browse to explore the most popular stations and podcasts on TuneIn today. Millions of listeners like you can't be wrong.
America, your children have an amazing superpower. That's right. They can help save lives by simply washing their hands. Just 20 seconds of thorough hand washing after they've coughed or sneezed or been outside can help fight against the dastardly spread of germs. Armed with only soap and water and hands, your superhero can protect you, your family, and everyone out there in America land. Amazing! Find out more at coronavirus.gov. A message from the CDC and the Ad Council.
Always talk about the losers in a trade war.
You benefit if you're just further away from China.
So that you can too.
What are the ramifications if she crumbles or doesn't crumble?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Surveillance Economics.
We are being taken out of our comfort zone by the coronavirus.
Dollar weakness is pretty much a good thing for a lot of the rest of the world.
Finance.
We are going to see a global demand contraction this year, most likely, for oil. The financial health of the business sector has deteriorated somewhat.
Investment.
Obviously, the value in high-vol stocks are going to continue to suffer.
It looks as though the bond market is talking itself into a recession here.
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrell, and Lisa Abramowitz on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. John Farrell, Lisa Abramowitz, and Tom Keene. Thank you for being with us after a most historic day yesterday in oil. It continues this morning. We see the continued churn in West Texas Intermediate with the June contract coming in a 16 level on that. We'll get to that in a moment. But what you need to know now, Global Wall Street, is Brent crude joins the drop in oil. An abrupt drop in Brent crude, down 17% with a 21 handle. We saw an 18 handle on Brent crude earlier this morning. Just absolutely extraordinary. So we've got much to talk about on oil, on these markets in general, and of course, the moment of this pandemic. Right now, though, Bloomberg Surveillance always brought to you by Cohn-Resnick Advisory, Assurance Tax, for ideas to stabilize your business and find opportunity amid uncertainty. Visit the Cohn-Resnick Coronavirus Resource Center at cohnresnick.com/COVID-19. And we always thank Cohn-Resnick for their support. John, I mentioned the idea that the oil collapse has gone global, but it's much more than that. In every interview, it is our learning about demand and the effects of a sudden drop in demand.
Well, I think on the demand point, the broader market has accepted the demand shock associated with the crude price plunge. I think something we need to pay a bit more attention to is have we realized the price shock more broadly through markets? Because, Tom, for me, they're two different things.
Well, we've seen that, and corn coming in as well. Just good morning out in the Midwest, but corn having an extremely difficult week as well. Lisa, and this goes back to all the Fed action and, frankly, the bond guesstimates, which is of disinflation and deflation. The whole reinflation feel has sort of drifted away Friday and into this Monday, Tuesday.
Yeah, here's the conundrum. If you look at break-even rates, you see they are above where they were at the March lows, but still very low, especially when you consider the trillions of dollars that the Federal Reserve and Congress are pumping into the economy, let alone the Bank of Japan and the ECB. The question is, what can central banks do further to ignite inflationary expectations at a time of such incredibly intense disinflationary tendencies?
We need an update. John Farrell with an update on the views of Lawrence Kudlow. You spoke to Larry Kudlow. Is he optimistic, John, that we can get this legislation in the next 48, 72, or 200 hours?
Aspirational, hopeful, and certainly open to tweaking the rules as well. We've talked about the embarrassment of several big public companies getting access to funds that were set aside for small businesses. I hope we can change those rules. I think we can all acknowledge, though, Tom, when you act quickly, you will always leave cracks and space for things to go wrong. They had to act fast, and that was the uncomfortable downside we had to accept. Though I think every time you update this and top it up, you can tweak the rules a little bit. One thing that I've heard a lot about in the last 24 hours and haven't heard the administration on yet is whether they should actually just top it up. They should just leave it open-ended, this program, because so many people need access to this money, and quite clearly it's running out quicker than they can top it up.
And this is so important, Lisa. Before we go to our esteemed guest, Lisa, to me, what's so interesting here is the weekly ballet. We started out March guesstimating April. April drifts away. We're guesstimating May. And I would say in the last 2 business days, we're beginning to think about June. Lisa, when do we start thinking about July?
We have no concept, right? And I think that people were saying last week that if you look at stocks, they were pricing in some sort of resolution by July, some more certainty. If this continues beyond that, what's going to be the issue? I will say, John, to the point of small businesses and some of the ire about some of the publicly traded companies that have gotten money, is that even a problem if they're using it in a prudent way to keep their employees on the payroll? Or is this just a matter of just not enough money being available to all businesses? I mean, honestly, I think this is an important debate, Tom.
No, it's a huge problem. It's a massive problem. No, it's not even the spirit of it, Tom. It's when you set policy with a specific set of objectives. Now, if you have a small business program, it's to help small businesses. There is a lot of help elsewhere available for public companies. Go tap the debt market if you're investment grade. The Fed's got your back. For a small business, the last thing we want in a mandated shutdown is to make small businesses compete against public companies which have a whole army of accountants behind them that can do this work for them. Because guess who's going to lose? The small business.
I think that's a key distinction, the public company idea of it, John. I had a heated conversation once over a beverage of my choice with William Dunkelberg of the National Federation of Independent Businesses, the people that really try to gauge small business mood. And I said to Bill Dunkelberg, I said, what's a small business? And it's not 1 or 20 or 30 people. It can be as high as hundreds and indeed 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 people. But a publicly traded company, I agree with you, John, has a lot of advantages.
Well, I hope if they top up the funds a little bit later, either today or through the week, that we can tweak the rules just a little bit. We're going to continue the conversation on the crude fallout. We can do that with Jane Foley of Rabobank, the head of FX strategy. Jane, fantastic to catch up with you. There's a demand shock. The market, relative to where it was a month, 6 weeks ago, has become very comfortable, relatively speaking, with that demand shock. Then there is a price shock, like the one we saw with crude in the last 24 hours. Have we fully realized the risks associated with the price shock in the crude market?
Well, I mean, it's difficult to know with the crude market. Maybe we have. I think this is going to start panning out, of course, in other contracts. I think we've already begun to see that. But I think in terms of the demand shock, I don't think the market is yet necessarily comfortable with that, because I think we've only just begun to really get a glimpse of the demand shock. So, for instance, if we look at the economic data, we know that we've only just got the beginnings of the economic data that refer to the shutdown periods. If we think about unemployment, we know that unemployment is going to remain elevated for quite a long period of time. There's your demand shock coming all the way through. The demand is going to take quite a long time to get back to normal. And then we've got other issues. So, for instance, some countries I think are going to be different in terms of the demand shock to others. If we look at Australia, so the total amount of deaths in Australia linked to COVID-19 is just 72. If we link that and compare that to the US or Italy or Spain or the UK, where we've seen tens of thousands, clearly this is very different psychologically. So in Australia, it's quite likely when they start unwinding their shutdowns, which will happen from May the 11th, that people are going to feel more confident to go to the hairdressers, to go to the restaurant, to go to shops, etc. Here, you're going to have workers refusing to go to work. You're going to have people refusing to sit in restaurants, to sit in bars for a long time. So the demand shock, I think, is going to be, a work in progress. And this means that for commodities markets, the oil market, other commodities, it's difficult to really know exactly when the market is going to feel comfortable with that.
Although it does seem like it's a long way off, or at least months away, before we start to get a true revival in some of the major developed market economies. And given that, do you think that the market is accurately pricing in the potential of deflation?
No, I don't think it can. I think it's impossible to do anything accurately at the moment. I just don't think that there is enough data. I don't think there's enough modern experience to really gauge the extent of this crisis. But the deflation or the inflation is going to be interesting. We do have some clues to this. So, for instance, if we go back to the global financial crisis, and if we look at all of the quantitative easing that came after that, initially we had an awful lot of economists, an awful lot of commentators saying, oh, this is going to be hugely inflationary. And yet, look at wage inflation, look at CPI inflation. We never had that inflationary impact, but we did have it in asset prices. We had it in equity prices. In many countries, we had it in houses, we had it in classic cars, we had it in jewellery, etc. So the money did find its way, and that was quite interesting because that led to quite a lot of political upsets. A lot of countries voting for populist presidents or populist prime ministers wanting a change because they didn't like the inequality that went along with that. So there is a cost to bear, and not all of that is necessarily financial.
Jane Foley with Rabobank with us with futures at negative 54. They deteriorate. Dow futures near negative 600, negative 584. And the VIX over 2 days, folks, has moved 8 big figures, 47.39 on the VIX. Yields come in with curve flattening as well. Jane, I want to go to the emerging markets where the real squeezes out to 5.32, not trading yet. Argentinian peso hyper managed out to a 66. Even Mexican peso weakens out. We're going to get a 7 on Turkish lira at some point today or tomorrow. These are signals of an ebbing away, a drifting away in so many EM currencies. When do they break?
Well, they will break, I think, when the global economy starts to recover, at least until we can accurately foresee when that recovery is. I mean, what you've just outlined in terms of what these emerging markets are doing really is the reverse of the dollar story. The dollar is strong because these markets are weak. And when we begin to see confidence re-emerging in these markets, that's when the dollar story, the dollar strength story, will break. So it's the other side of the coin. And I think it's going to be several months, really, before we begin to get there.
Jane, never enough time. Thank you so much. Jane Foley with us with Rabobank today. Just extraordinary. Her strong dollar call, resilient dollar call has really been industry leading. Right now with our news in New York City, here's Michael Barr.
Tom, Lisa, John, thank you very much. President Trump says that he will sign an executive order suspending all immigration to the United States in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. A move like this would be absolutely unprecedented and would essentially shut down the legal immigration system. During the 1918 flu, more than 100,000 immigrants legally came into this country. The Trump administration declared the country has enough lab testing capacity for states to begin reopening their economies. But Bloomberg's Martin DeCaro tells us governors say they are struggling to obtain a key tool in the pandemic fight.
It took 22 days of nonstop negotiations for Maryland to acquire 500,000 coronavirus tests from a South Korean company. So lab capacity may help, but only if states can pull off what Maryland Governor Larry Hogan did, find the tests and the equipment necessary.
Some of the things that we still need help on from the federal government.
To track the virus and safely reopen offices and stores.
I know that some of my fellow governors are all out there working hard to find testing capabilities.
Some states reopening this week. A frustrated Hogan points to the White House's own guidelines. States are supposed to have 14 consecutive days of reduced coronavirus cases before relaxing restrictions. In Washington, Martin DeCaro, Bloomberg Radio.
A pair of New Yorkers, one a Yankees fan, the other a Mets booster, want their money back. They filed a lawsuit demanding ticket refunds for games that have been called off because of the coronavirus. It's expected that Major League Baseball will offer credit toward tickets to games in 2021, but the plaintiffs say that, given the circumstances, they'd rather have their money back. Global news, 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. John, Lisa, Tom.
Michael Barr, thank you very much, sir. In the markets, in earnings season, we're looking for guidance. Lisa, something you've been talking about the last couple of days, flying blind. Credit Suisse's Jonathan Golub with a note yesterday speaking to that. At the time of writing, of the 47 companies that reported to date, 9 had previously provided guidance. Of these, only 3 updated their projections, 6 withdrew. This is what Jonathan Golub's got to say, and I think this is interesting. The lack of guidance should leave estimates too high for future quarters, even after first quarter reports. Something to chew on.
That's really interesting. Basically, the sort of a tendency to be hopeful on Wall Street, leaving probable expectations too high. I think this really is an important kind of consideration as we get the big tech earnings next week and Netflix after the bell.
Netflix after the close, a conversation coming up on this program ahead of the opening bell, 1 hour, 17 minutes away from the cash open this Tuesday morning. Session lows down by 1.9% on the S&P 500. We are down by 54 points. Some risk aversion for you. In the commodity market, crude is lower, the pain spreading through the crude curve in the United States and internationally.
Elite advisory firms rely on BNY Mellon's Pershing to meet the needs of their most complex clients. Karen Novak, Chief Operating Officer at Pershing Advisor Solutions, explains how.
At BNY Mellon's Pershing, we bring customized insights and strategies to help you grow your advisory business and stay on the leading edge. We can support the needs of your most sophisticated clients with a full range of investment and wealth management solutions, from access to private banking to consolidated bank and brokerage custody. Learn why so many of the largest advisory firms turn to us for the financial strength and high-touch service that BNY Mellon's Pershing can provide. Are you well positioned to stand out from your competition?
Learn more at Pershing.com or call 800-445-4467. Brokerage custody provided by Pershing LLC and other services provided by Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC. Both members of FINRA and SIPC. Private banking and bank custody provided by BNY Mellon NA. Member FDIC.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Influential conversations from